months since I pulled this thing out. So there you have it. She started. Awesome. First engine start after the rebuild of the Lancer 0360 engine. Although that was a short few seconds watching it start, it was actually about 20-25 minutes worth of stress before I actually turned the key, making sure everything was good. So that stressed me out a little. And the next thing that stressed me out was the actual first flight, which came shortly after. And that's what we're going to discuss in this episode. We are going to talk about, what I did in the process of before I got going, as well as discuss a little bit about the startup that we just saw, and what happened during the first flight, and what I'm going to be looking at in the future, because there were a few issues that I'm working out. Nothing terrible, just stuff that I got to work out. So my name is Tony. This is Hut Pilot. Welcome back, and let's get to it. So before we get going, it's important that I let you know I am not an AME. The way I figured this stuff out was by reading a bunch of different documents, watching a couple of videos that mentioned the information that I thought was pertinent to my particular airplane, put it all together and came up with my own plan on what I would do. So I suggest you do the same for your specific project and not just think that what I'm telling you is absolute gold and this is what you should do. This is information only. So that being said, what I have done in my readings is there was, let's call it, two trains of thought. One was the lycoming train of thought, and one was the Mike Bush way of doing things. Neither one, in my opinion, is wrong, but what do I know? Like I said, I really like the Mike Bush stuff. If you research engine braking for Mike Bush, he'll have an entire video on that on YouTube. Some of the highlights of Mike's video is that you make sure that the oil temperature is between 160 and 200 degrees Fahrenheit. Also, that you keep your run up to an absolute minimum. Get your butt in the plane and get in the air. So if you've got to cycle a prop, not more than one cycling of the prop. Also, that you run the plane as close to 100% power. And keeping in mind the temperature, because we don't want to damage those brand new cylinders. The temperature should not go higher for any cylinder head temperature. Should not be higher than 440 degrees Fahrenheit. It's 420 for a Continental. And you do this for about 1 to 2 hours, where you should expect that the cylinder head temps lower at that point. Also, make sure that you check the oil level before and after each flight, because as the braking process goes in, the oil consumption will be much less than it will on your first hour or two of flight. What I've read on lycoming is that it recommends anything over 65% power. The idea is that at 65% power, the rings themselves can expand, and therefore, that braking process can happen on your individual cylinders, based on what I read. So I chose like 70-75% power, and I figured it was almost to what Mike Bush wanted. And closer to what lycoming was recommended. So I went middle of the road with this. I've got notes. Look, I hide nothing. These are my notes, and these were in my pocket, and they were pasted on my plane when I was figuring out what I needed to do. And I combined the two, and I came up with a list. So what I'm going to give you now, and it'll appear somewhere on the screen, is that exactly. The other thing that was important for lycoming is that there's no mixture, like rich mixture on the whole process, and the density altitude is at no more than 5,000 feet. Now, my airport sits at 3360, so that's 4360 at circuit height. So I was pretty much around 5,000 feet during this whole process, and probably, unfortunately, a little higher because I can't fly at 10 feet over the ground because density altitude was a little more than 5,000 feet on this particular day. In my readings for lycoming, what I found was a multiple step process for the startup. The first startup would last 30 seconds to 1 minute, and the goal was basically to get the oil pressure to the top of the green, and if it wasn't, shut it down. Do an idle down to about 600 RPM, shut down, check for leaks, wait for it to cool. The second startup would last 1 to 2 minutes, where they tell you to warm the engine until the temperature needle is off the peg, as they called it. Do a brief mag check drop. Bring it down to idle at 600 RPM, and when you do a mixture cutoff, the rise should be 25 to 50 RPM minimum. What I did was actually combine the two startups. So the plan was have a single startup that lasts more or less 2 minutes. And my goal was the same. Get the oil pressure to the top of the green within a minute. Get the oil temp off the peg within 2 minutes. Do a mag check with a very brief run-up. Note the mag drop, and it was fine. Do the idle minimum 600 RPM, make sure the engine just doesn't die there. Do a mixture idle cutoff, maximum 25 to 50 RPM rise. Shut it down, check for leaks, install the cowling, and go flying.
Brake check. Everything's been a while, and brake check, we're good.
Sadly, the camera behind my head gave out just after a few minutes, so I don't have any visual on the takeoff. But the plan was as follows. Full power for takeoff aboard if the EGT ever got to 1500, either before takeoff or during flight at any time, abort the flight. Use a shallow climb to make sure that I had maximum cooling inside the engine area. Maximum density altitude was supposed to be around 5,000 feet-ish. RPM 75% power. The flight time max was going to be 2 hours. It actually was a little over 1 hour. Land, I checked the oil consumption, make sure I didn't lose all my oil out the engine. Did an inspection of the engine once more. Removed the oil filter, cut it open to inspect whether there was any metal in it at all, and there wasn't.
Osbury traffic, Lancer, Foxtrot Zulu, Sierra Zulu is setting up on runway 28. We'll be staying in the circuit at about 1,500, maybe 2,000 above the runway, doing an engine check. Zulu, Sierra Zulu, Osbury.
All right, here we go. Static. Let's go. There's Breeze alive. Slow climb. Here coming up. Temps in the 390s. Number 4 is hot. 431. I want to keep it at 420. 1890 to 2025.
Osbury Zulu, Sierra Zulu, left turn out. We'll be circling the airport in the left-hand circuit.
got 4 minutes in, 3 minutes in. Got 395, 380, 418, 429. Memphis coming down on number 4.
And that's where we are right now. I mentioned at the beginning I had some problems. The problem is the cylinder number 4 is hotter than the rest. It always was, even before I tore down the engine and rebuilt it. I guess it's just the way the cowling is. It's tightly cowled. Even with the plenum, it's always been the hottest cylinder on the plane. So right now I've been working that issue and slowly bringing down the temp. I've been trying different things, playing with stuff inside the plenum, redirecting air. As of this morning, I've got 12 hours on the engine since that first flight. So I flew the plane for about an hour and 20 minutes or so, brought it down, tore the filter apart. There was no metal, no issues at all. Everything was nice and clean. Put a fresh filter on, and I've been flying with that. Oil consumption after the first 3 hours was 1 quart. Since then, I've put on, I want to say, I don't know, another 7 hours, 7.5 hours since the last filter change, I guess. And I've got like maybe half a quart that's used. So the oil consumption is going down really quick. It's nice. The oil looks good even after, I don't know, whatever amount of hours I've got in it total. And everything seems to be fine. Static RPM has definitely gone up from what it was before I got the engine rebuilt. So that's a positive thing. I really haven't seen any big performance gains out of the higher compression pistons, but I've got a fixed pitch prop as well, so it's like RPM is RPM. Can't do much about it. However, I do get max 2700 RPM at straight and level flight at lower altitudes, because it's hard to tell when density altitude is 7,000 feet or 8,000 feet. But there's definitely a kind of a gain of sorts. The engine really feels different than it did before. The sound is very different than it was before, to me. I guess nobody else would know that. So as I continue to work those issues, I'll bring you some regular updates as we get along with the regular program of flying around and going to different places. All right, so thanks for joining me. I hope you subscribe if you're not already subscribed to my channel, and we'll see you on the next one.